folks, welcome to the channel, Trickle Down Philosophy. I'm Don. We're taking a look at crazy and or violent Bible verses. A lot of folks obviously believe in a higher power. It's estimated that something like, and sociologists who have studied this like worldwide, that roughly 85 to 90% of people believe that there is a higher power by whatever name they give that power, or that power is known to them. So it is relevant to what takes place on planet Earth if 85% of people believe that there's a higher power. It doesn't mean it's true, clearly. It just means it's relevant in some way. I'm agnostic. I'm not out to prove things. I'm comfortable with all the things I don't know. I'm not out to prove anything in that regard. I do like kindness. I do like civility. I like nuanced discussion. People who walk around like a bull in a china shop just bludgeoning people with their ideas, be they theological, scientific, political, sociological, anything like that, those people don't interest me, because I like to have sort of congenial discussion about things, which allows a comfort to express your ideas. They get to express their ideas, and so on. So I'm not here to discredit anything in particular. What I am doing with this particular video and the crazy or some of the violent verses is to sort of show why it might be difficult for people to accept that there is a God who is loving, and a God who is paying attention, and a God who we're to model ourselves after, but then who, it is theorized, had people write these texts on his behalf. So we're going to look at them, and maybe this will encourage a little bit of moderation if you're a hardcore theologian, however you want to define that, or a fundamentalist Christian, and maybe understand why people wouldn't buy into this or accept that that is a healthy or good or rational or way to go about making sense of life. Now, presentism is kind of a new word, if you will, that is, it involves the anachronistic part of judging earlier people, earlier events, earlier ways that a society may have done things by today's standards. Because things change over time. And it's not just technology changes and such, but people's attitudes change in given cultures. So to judge prior people by today's standards is just inappropriate. You're not going to get a full sense of things unless you look at the culture, the time in which those folks lived. But I will say this, with that in mind, there are certain things that just might strike you as, even though it was back in the day, this seems barbaric or just nuts. So I'm going to read some of these. And my idea is not to turn anybody into an atheist or anybody against Christianity or Judaism or anything. It would be that here is a perception problem, and here also might be a genuine problem on logical grounds, that if you're positing that God is love, God is good, and God doesn't change, and then we read some of these verses in here, you're like, all right, there's a disconnect. I don't know if it's a cognitive dissonance or just a literary dissonance between what's posited about God and then what we would read here. So I'm just going to read some of them. All right, in 2 Kings 2:23, and this is in no particular order, 2 Kings 2, verses 23 to 25. He went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" Thank you very much. And he turned around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the boys. From there he went on to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. Right? So Elisha curses these guys, and 2 she-bears come out of the woods and rip 42 boys apart. And one of the things that might catch you're like, okay, that's, Little Red Riding Hood type story where all these things happen. But there were 2 bears and 42 boys. Now, to my mind, There's no way that two bears could catch 42 boys. As soon as they saw those bears, they would have run away. And the bears, there's no way they would have caught these 42 boys. And it's just one of those details. This would never overthrow somebody's faith in something. It could have just been an anecdote thrown in there to make a given point. And fair enough, as a literary device. There are more of those in the Hebrew Bible, I think, than in the New Testament. But he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Now, what that curse was, I don't know. Maybe he returned fire. They called him bald head. Maybe he called them dickhead. I don't know. Whatever he might have called them. But if it was in the name of the Lord, I doubt he would have used such language, but maybe so. But now we've got 42 dead boys because they called Elisha a name, bald head. That seems a little bit harsh. All right, then we jump to, we're going to look in 1 Samuel 15, 2-3. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. It's basically like just go scorched earth on them. Now I get in the name of war, in the name of battle, it's ugly. War is hell. I think that was Patton who said that. It might have been MacArthur, but anybody would agree with that by and large, that war is hell. So fair enough. You're going to return fire for fire. You're going to return actually stronger. Like you look at World War II when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. And I think it killed, I forget what the number was, maybe 1,400-ish or whatever. But the response that it brought the U.S. into World War II, and the response was tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Japanese died and others. So it's kind of like if somebody punches you in the face, once that adrenaline hits you and you decide to fight back, you're not just going to punch them in the face and walk away. The way it really works is you're going to try to destroy them, to debilitate them, not necessarily kill them, not for just a punch to the face, but you're going to try to like completely break their will to come back at you. So I understand that context of war, but the fact that the Lord Almighty is reported as saying, kill everybody, everything, and all the animals. Now, I'm not quite sure why the animals. That would be one that to the present day mind would be like, I don't know, it didn't seem like the camels and donkeys needed to go. Couldn't you take those back with you? Like they don't have a religion. That's not going to infect you if you're worried about, the Judaic line and the Davidic and Mosaic law and all that being disrupted or polluted. The animals wouldn't seem to be part of that. Now, the New Testament, 1 Timothy 2:12. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. Now, I'm assuming that this verse, even when I was into fundamentalist Christianity, this verse never made sense to me because I said, all right, let's take a look at this scenario. A woman gives birth, raises those kids, whatever the man does in the time. He goes out, trades, does whatever. He's out working, right? He's not in the home a whole bunch. She's raising them. Part of the raising of a child is to teach. You teach them things. And then the child grows up at a certain point, and then the woman is supposed to stop. She's not supposed to teach him any longer. At what point does a woman not have the ability any longer to teach when she's been raising this child her whole life? Right now, in 1 Timothy, it might say in the context of going into a church or an organized setting, and I say the same thing applies. How is it that a woman's knowledge is irrelevant? How is it that half the world's population somehow wouldn't have anything to offer simply because it's in a congregation? It never made sense to me. And then when it says she must be quiet, I'm thinking, well, this is certainly a person who's been involved with a woman or two or three before and just wanting his way. Like I've done videos before where I've pointed out some of the verses where Paul says, for example, I'm not giving you the Lord's word. I'm giving you my word. I'm giving you my opinion. And he gave his opinion a lot, as did others. The texts themselves, I stopped seeing them as the word of God when I started to see all the places where people said directly, I'm giving you my opinion. I'm giving you my judgment. And I personally think when I read this that this is exactly that this is a person who says, you know what, I really don't feel like dealing with women. I don't feel like hearing from them any longer. All right, now we're going to jump to 1 Peter 2:18. Slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the cruel. So even if you have a cruel master, subject yourself to that person. And I'd always, I tried to make these verses fit back when I ran in the fundamentalist group. I tried to make these verses fit with the employer-employee model. That maybe just the translators sort of used different wording, and it just didn't fit. Slavery was the way of the day. Aristotle even said it, that it was just natural to mankind to have slaves. Is estimated, I saw something somewhere, I don't know who did this, but that roughly a third of the world's population was enslaved. And it's just a matter of the more vulnerable groups get captured by larger groups, and the larger groups make them do their work. But even though in America and colonized countries, we don't embrace slavery any longer, so it's a form of presentism. I don't necessarily judge the people who had slaves back in the time here that they're referring to. I just think it's abhorrent that a loving, caring God would even have an instruction that says, slaves, obey even your cruel masters. So anyway, you might be able to see, based on how I started the video by saying, why people might have a problem accepting this as the model for what their faith might be. Okay, now in Malachi chapter 2, verses 2-4, if you will not hear, and if you will not lay it to heart, to give glory unto my name, said the Lord of hosts, I will even send a curse upon you, and I will curse your blessings. Yea, I have cursed them already, because you do not lay it to heart. Behold, I will corrupt your seed, and spread dung upon your faces, and the dung of your even the dung of your solemn feasts, and one shall take you away with it. And you shall know that I have sent this commandment to you, that my covenant might be with Levi, said the Lord of hosts. It's like, okay, that does seem a bit extreme. Exodus 21, verses 20-21. When a man strikes his slave, it's going back to the earlier one. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. The slave shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. And that's just something that you would say, man, that this is sanctioned and even instructions given ostensibly by the Creator who loves people. You could see that there's a logical or rational disconnect there. Okay, now I'm going to jump to Revelation, and this is one that is just sort of crazy to me. The book of Revelation is itself that. I tried making sense of it back in the day too, and even though I could to myself make sense of the other a lot of the other texts, I could never make sense of this. Now you can see why many people wouldn't embrace this. Revelation 13, 1-8. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?" Now, when you come to this as an adult and look at this, and many people do, they're like, "I don't know what that means. That's just crazy." But you might be able to understand why people who are on the outside of the family of the Christian faith, if you will, would have a problem when they read this, because some folks have even said it sounds like John was on acid when he wrote this, if in fact it was John who wrote it. Okay, now that was only up to verse 4. I'll read verses 5 to 8. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months. Now, mind you, I just read the account of the 42 boys who had been dashed by 2 she-bears. It's like, well, that really couldn't have happened in real life. There's no way 2 bears are going to catch 42 boys unless they're all locked in a pen. But that wasn't part of the text. If they were locked in a pen and the bears got in like fox in a hen house and they got in there and got them, I could see it. That wasn't the case. They were just walking around doing their thing. Got to tell you, the vast majority of those boys would have made it home alive. But we've got 42 months. The beast opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. So that's just another part where people are like, we have dragons, curses. This one's got 10 heads and crowns and thorns and speaking horrible things. People worshipped it. And you could make a certain amount of sense on that. If there winds up being a world ruler at some point in mankind's history, in the future, you could say, all right, it kind of fits that model. But when we've got dragons and beasts coming out of the sea doing this kind of stuff, it does lack a bit of credibility, believability. The willful suspension of unbelief or disbelief is a bit strained here. And then if you look at the continuation, in Revelation 13, verses 11 to 17, I'll just read a couple of them. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. So these are just, this is probably 1% of the verses that are very difficult to make sense of. So I don't say these things for people to be talked out of their faith. That is not where I come from. My position is, if you're going to convince anybody who may not have heard this before, you're up against it. Because there are legitimate moral concerns with the notion, and there are legitimate logical disconnects here between the premises that God is loving, caring, invested in human beings. He's in Jeremiah 4:24, I think, he's in a loving kindness, patience, gentleness. But then we read verses like this, where he's commanding slaves to listen to their abusive masters. And rather than putting an end to slavery somehow, or beasts and dragons, it just seems to be a disconnect there. Maybe in our age of rationalization or trying to make more sense of things, maybe it's okay for us to have a problem with these things. So anyway, this is just part of trickle-down philosophy. You take philosophical ideas, you take logical constructs, you're trying to make sense of large ideas and wed them to the smaller ideas, if you will. that may be attached to them. You look at premises, you look at conclusions, and it all trickles down through every human endeavor, and especially the endeavors that we try to explain, because then we're liable to be scrutinized. Our words will. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for playing along. Have a great day. I'll see you on another video, and keep thinking philosophically.